Well, hello, friends and neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here. Welcome again to my little basement nook with whiskey. Today, I want to talk to you about another ex-sherried Scotch. I actually had other whiskeys lined up, and I'm hoping I can shoot another episode tomorrow. But after doing the Abelard 10 last week, I realized I had this Tullibardine open and really fit with that. So I knew I had to talk to you guys about this. So this will be my thoughts on this Highland Scotch from Tullibardine. This is Tullibardine 500 Sherry Finish. 3, 4. Thanks for staying with me through the break. I really don't know that much about Tullibardine, and I will admit this is actually the only bottle from that distillery I've ever had. I did a quick, search and a bit of reading and learned that, started in the 1940s, but then as many distilleries happened when whiskey wasn't all the rage that it is today. It was mothballed in the 90s. And then, got sold to various people. It's in production. It's with a French company that, I'll put here, but I don't really know them. Apparently, it's the only distillery they had. Really, in 2011, it's been kind of going hard since then. And they have a core range of no age stamp bottles, but that have different finishes. I don't know if I said this already or not, but this is actually the only Tullibardine bottle I've had. The number relates to the liter size of the sherry butt that it was finished in. So I have read that it's filtered, colored, and it aged for an undetermined amount of time in first fill bourbon, so that's nice, and then finished for likely around a year, hard to find the exact time, in the larger, 500 liter sherry butt, in this case, likely Pedro Jimenez. Not all of that information is on here. You kind of got to dig around the internet and catch other reviews, and it seems to be that's sort of the accepted idea of what's going on in here. So as I said, it's 43%, so that's nice, but sadly, it's filtered and very likely colored, which is too bad because when it's a sherry bottle, I actually like to consider color because I imagine there's those rich fortified sherry wine kicking around. It's soaked into the oak, and that's going to give us some color. When I hear it's colored, I'm like, well, I have no idea. Well, let's see what the Scotch tells us here. Fig, thick red, plum pudding, no, bread pudding, bready, a little grainy. But a pretty good sherried nose. Kind of a creamy, kind of a red fruit, but thicker, so fig. If there's spicing, it's not coming up at first. It's really closer to the essential kind of a malt character, but true to the finishing, definite sherry notes on the nose. Let's see what it tastes like. Nodja. That's a little richer than I expected. It is a little chocolate in there. Darker fruit, leathered fruit. Some bitterness, some astringency. That's too bad. Fig again. Better have another sip. Hope you have something to pour along. I think it's the only way to do YouTube. I know when I catch up on other channels, and I really try to watch everybody that I've subscribed to, I like to pour a little in the same vein, whether it's a bourbon or a Scotch, and just enjoy. Yeah, pretty thick nose. It's a little sharp there. Yeah, a creamy texture, which I kind of like. Little bitter, bitter like when I mentioned a chocolate note, like a really bitter chocolate, like a really heavy dark chocolate. I'm not saying the taste is heavy chocolate. It's just a light chocolate, but I'm trying to get at describing what is that bitter note. Hazelnut. Sometimes when I have fresh cracked hazelnuts, they've got that nut powder on them. This isn't terribly nutty either, but I'm trying to get at that a little bit of tannic, a little bit of bitterness. That definitely is part of the palate. Finish is drying, leans back into black tea and leather and dried fruits. And oak. Yeah. Seasoned, older, wetter oak. There's a little bit of a sulfur note in this, almost through the whole experience. Yeah, there's a fair amount of sulfur note in this that doesn't put me off, but I've heard a number of people comment, not in this bottle, but of a sulfur note, so I just kind of want a heads up. In some ways, a little bit like a Glenfarclas, that I often get a bit of a sulfur note in that. So, this bottle on its own, I got it at the fantastic liquor store Sierra Springs, Airdrie, just outside of Calgary. So obviously I had to pay the decent price. I see it on the shelves around here for a tougher amount to justify. This is a good Scotch. I think it really does is darker, a little bitter, and really on that older leathered sherry, even though it's a non-age stamp. And I think if you really like that, almost on the edge of sulfur, that heavy, winey notes, I think you'd like this. And I like it. It's really more like a 3.5 star, 3 3/4, just under 4. But I like it. And sometimes I get a bit of coffee out of it. Like it's a decent dram. I thought, well, why not compare it to what I had just the other day? Let me clear my palate. In case for some reason you're new to Scotch, and yet you've tuned in, I want to say, you often don't see me pour, and it's because I guess I could pour and then cut. I'm a big believer in pouring and resting Scotch. I really like I don't know who, well, Ralphie, I think, was like a minute for every year. I don't really go by that, but mostly because I have pretty young Scotches in my collection. But I definitely like to pour, leave it for sure for 10, 15 minutes, and then come back. I find some of the really high alcohols, those really sharp alcohols, tend to evaporate. And I like to think that flavors have been evolving in the glass, and then I can just enjoy them. So the Aberlour 10, as I said last time, it's in the Speyside region, and someone called me out on that, except, Speyside is a sub-region of Highland, and any distillery in Speyside can choose legally to go Speyside or Highland. And in this case, Aberlour right on here says Highland single malt. So I thought I would honor their choice in how they want to talk about their Scotch. So the Aberlour 10 is only 40% and likely chill filtered and colored. So probably, pretty similar in fair comparison, a little lighter on alcohol. Interesting, because I made the comment that the 10-year-old is darker than the 12-year-old, which really has some light, fresh berry. But in this comparison, we're still on the spectrum, and this is lighter fruits than the Tullibardine. Tullibardine, I hope I said that right. So I'm getting fresher caramel. Well, I know that's not the sherry, that's the ex-bourbon, but really a fresh toffee caramel note, and then a nice lighter red fruit. Yeah, this one has a definite a little espresso, a little bitter old oak, and a little leathered fruit compared in this sitting to the 10-year-old. On the palate, Sanja. That is an interesting comparison. A little spicier. Yeah, more cinnamon or wood spice for sure. This NAS from Tullibardine. Darker, shaved edge of nut husk, chocolate, that kind of stuff. A bitterness I'm struggling to get around, but put that aside. And it is creamier and darker. Like, yeah. Wow. Wow. I don't know which one I like better. I really don't. Really, critically, they probably rate the same because they have different flaws, but flaws. If you like that darker, wetter oak, sometimes people will say, you know, they get a wet cardboard with some heavy X sherry, and I'm worried that you might get a little bit of that here, or that the sulfur notes might come off too strong here. So it's tough for me to recommend this. My personal palate has no problem with those notes in this bottle. And I'll say, in this sitting, since this was 3 3/4 type star, I'll move this up to 4. And in this sitting and in this comparison, I kind of like this bottle a little more because it's singing my my tune of dark sherried notes with some older tasting oak, even though it's a non-age stamp. Well, thanks for joining me again here in the whiskey nook of my basement. A viewer said this, and I have a number of bottles here that are hopefully going to review before the end of the year. I want to talk about Pike Creek 21. I've got this Millstone 100 Rye, which is interesting. Got a bottle of Old Tub down here. I really got to talk about that before it's all gone. But we'll see. There's a lot of open bottles and not enough time to visit with you guys. Thanks for joining me here. And you guys have a great weekend.